Story 1. The neighbor who wasn't there. It started with a knock. 3 soft taps at my apartment door. I froze. It was the 3rd night of lockdown. No one was supposed to be outside, let alone knocking on doors at 2 a.m. The hallway was silent except for the low hum of the emergency lights. I hesitated, then checked the peephole. Empty hallway. Another knock. This time, slower, deliberate, like whoever was on the other side knew I was watching. I held my breath. Who's there? Silence. Then, a voice low, familiar. It's me. My stomach twisted. It sounded like my neighbor, Mr. Porter, the man who lived across the hall. Except Mr. Porter had died last week. The knock came again, louder this time. Let me in. I stepped back. My hands were shaking as I dialed security. It rang once, then cut to static. A scraping noise echoed from the other side of the door, like nails dragging across the wood. Then, a whisper. You let me in yesterday. My blood ran cold. I hadn't opened my door for anyone in days. I backed away, gripping a kitchen knife as I stared at the door, heart hammering. The knocking stopped, but then I heard the deadbolt slide open. Story 2. The roommate in the mirror. The lockdown made me start noticing things I had ignored before. The way my reflection moved a fraction of a second slower than me. The way its lips didn't always match mine when I spoke. At first, I blamed exhaustion, cabin fever, too many sleepless nights. But then, the messages started appearing, written on my mirror in condensation, just after a shower. You're not alone. I lived alone. The next day, another message. Stop looking. I cover my mirrors. Stop checking my reflection. But one night I forgot. I walked past the bathroom and caught a glimpse of myself. My reflection didn't move. I stepped closer. It smiled and whispered, finally. Then, the lights went out. Story 3. The voice in the vent. The first time I heard it, I thought it was the wind. A soft whisper drifting through the air vents of my locked-down apartment. But then I realized it was speaking. A voice. A child's voice. Hello. Can you hear me? I froze. My building was empty. Most tenants had left before the lockdown. I pressed my ear against the vent. Who's there? Silence. Then a giggle. I live here. My breath caught. Where? A pause. Then the voice whispered. Inside. The air turned ice cold. I grabbed a flashlight and unscrewed the vent cover. My hands trembled as I peered inside. A tunnel stretched deep into the darkness. And then something moved. A pale, thin hand reached out, gripping the edge of the vent. I slammed it shut and never opened it again. Story 4. The man on the balcony. The first time I saw him, he was standing on the balcony of the apartment across from mine. It was past midnight, and the city was silent under lockdown. But there he was, tall, motionless, staring directly at my window. I turned off my lights and peeked from behind the curtain. He hadn't moved. He was still staring. For 3 nights, it was the same. Always at midnight. Always watching. On the 4th night, I decided to confront him. I stepped onto my balcony and shouted, "Who are you?" No response. Then, he did something that made my blood freeze. He lifted his hand, slowly, and pointed behind me. I spun around. My apartment was empty, but when I turned back, he was gone. The next morning, I asked the building security about the man. The guard gave me a confused look. There's no one in that apartment. It's been empty for years. Story 5. The TV knows. During lockdown, I got into the habit of falling asleep with the TV on. It made the apartment feel less lonely. One night, I woke up to static. I reached for the remote, but then a voice. Soft, distorted, crackling through the white noise. "Are you awake?" My blood turned to ice. I grabbed the remote and changed the channel. The voice remained. "You can't turn me off." I yanked the plug from the wall. The TV stayed on. The static deepened, swirling like a black hole. And then, the screen changed. It showed me, lying in bed, watching myself. Then, the me on the screen turned its head and smiled. The screen went black, and my reflection in the TV didn't disappear. Even after lockdown ended, these stories remained, because some doors never truly close.